go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. And then we need to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Vote by roll call.
Counselor Wick,
Aye.
Counselor Sini,
Aye.
Counselor Seha,
Aye.
and Counselor Ecclestone.
Aye.
And
And we
Counselor
got
Lee.
one
And
online.
Counselor Lee.
Aye.
All right, and a motion passes.
Presentations, proclamations, and any visitors in the lobby. Of any attendees?
Doesn't look like it.
Nope.
No public comment, no visitors. Move on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, roll by roll call.
And Counselor Wick,
Aye.
Counselor Sini.
Aye.
Counselor Seha,
Aye.
and Counselor Ecclestone,
Aye.
and Counselor Lee.
Aye.
And motion passes.
Going on to old business. There is no old business. New business. Session of water sewer rate annual adjustment. Ron?
Okay, so we brought this forward just to talk to council about some policy discussions related to preparation of this year's city budget. And so the easiest way to go over these policy discussions, I think, would be to go ahead and put our forecast model up on the screen. And for that, Josh Hoyer is here with us, and he's going to help us with that. There we go, Josh. Could we put the little dialogue box, Colleen, down? There you go. That'll be fine. Or you can put it down in the lower corner, either one. There you go. All right. And so this is the city's forecast model, and everything is looking really good for our city budgets, across budgets this year, with the exception of our water and sewer utilities. Typically, we would bring forward to council at the next council meeting our annual utility rate increase. And for many years, we've plugged that in at a standard 3% for both water and sewer. And that's been somewhat of the overall average operating increase costs. And so that's why we've used that number. It's the historical number. But as council knows, and most people do know, this year, we're seeing some historical inflationary rates. As a matter of fact, I think that this is it is historical. I don't think we've ever seen a inflation rate that's hit so fast over such a short period of time. And so because of that, things like fuel, the cost of fuel is going up, the cost of energy is going up, the cost of maintenance, repairs, all the things that wrap into a utility. A lot of our utility costs are energy driven. And so we've got this large increase in the energy sector. However, we have adopted a policy to maintain a 90-day operating reserve target. And when we budget, we try to preserve that target as much as we can. If we did that this year, we would be looking at somewhere between a 5% and a 10% increase in both of the water and the sewer utility. Discussions with the mayor, he's concerned that those increases will hit our community hard because everybody's dealing with the other increases, right? Food and everything that goes along with that. And he's wondering if there's a way for us to somehow postpone or supplement those increases. And that's what we're here to talk about. We do have a way to do that, but I want council to know that there are some risks before we make this policy decision. And so we're here to seek guidance. So for this discussion of this purpose, what I'm going to ask Josh to do is to go ahead and load in the water fund. And if council's okay, I'm going to come around to the screen just because it's easier for me to talk from. And if you look at this top bar that's colored, this is our summary bar. Now, everything below there, as you're aware of, is all of the things that go towards expenses, each of these individual line items. And we show historical information and we show future information. And the forecast model has done a really, really good job. It's very consistent of predicting some of these factors. So right now we're looking at the year 22, 23. 21, 22 is our current year. We expect to end this year, there's the highlight, at $486,000 in our account. Now that's good. That's where we've been trying to maintain. One of the reasons we're able to maintain a little higher balance than we even budget for is, you can see over there, our actuals are 446. Is because we typically have some money returned in expenditures. So as an example, we'll have a $50,000 repair line item, but not every year we have a $50,000 breakdown. A lot of years it might be 10, 20. Now this year, in fact, we did have a $50,000 breakdown in our sewer department. But it doesn't happen every year, but we have to budget in the event that it does. So as council, I'm just familiarizing council with how we've done this in the past, but you realize that's how we budget as part of this discussion. So if we look at the 22-23 year, we're looking pretty good. We're into the year, that green represents that we're above our 90-day policy target, okay? But then as you go out into future years, you can see that we're starting to go into the red. Now, typically when we budget, we want to, you see it's declining, it's going from 400 down to 96,000. Now that's not a minus 96, that's an ending fund balance of 96. However, we're headed in a downward trend. Now, what happens when we have a policy where we head into a downward trend? The further we go into that downward trend, the more of an increase we have to do at some point in the future to get it green again. So when we've got a model like this and we defer a cost that we know is going to occur, oftentimes to make that up, the compounding percent increases more in the future year. So as an example, we've done these models hundreds of times and we know how they play out. If there was a 5% increase today and we defer that and that 5% need held true and we deferred that for 3 years, that 5% increase would turn into 12 to 20% because there's a compounding effect. Just like if we know in 3 years we need 20%, we could do 5% now and that's it. And we make up that 20%. So that's part of why we have this forecast model. So one of the things that we are recommending is that we stay with our 3% standard increase and we don't go above that this year. That's what this model represents right now. However, what we've decided to do is to defer some expenditures. So Josh and I would recommend that we defer a $100,000 transfer this year from the water fund into the water capital improvement line item. Now we need to build money in the capital improvement line item to be able to do some of these projects that we have. Council knows we just got almost $4 million in grants for water related projects. That takes a lot of capital stress off that fund, so that's great, but we still have to have match for that project around $400,000 or $500,000, if possible, true for us, right? We don't know that that'll happen. And then we've got about $10 million in AC water line. There's about $20 million in outstanding water projects out there. So this wouldn't be a policy that we would recommend indefinitely. But for this year, if we get rid of that, if we just say, we're not going to make that transfer, So let's take that out. What does that do? So you look at the model. Well, now you're still declining, but at a slower rate. And from our perspective, for a financial planning, you're going to have some money returned in the water fund every year. So I'm not concerned about that end result for this particular fund. So I think we can do that 1 year, leave the rate how it is, and we will be fine. Here is the danger. The danger is we're running about an 8% CPI increase this year, but with the fuel prices and energy prices, that translates into a cost of much higher than that, okay? The danger is, what will next year look like? I have a feeling next year is going to be worse. So let's say we're at a 12 or 15% CPI. That would be a crazy number, but where we are right now, I don't know if that's out of the realm of possibility. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 12%, but I guarantee you it's going to be higher than 8. It's just, and it would be, we can't make that transition change that quickly. So if you factor in, now we factored in only a 3% increase in raises, or when I say raises, I mean increased cost as time goes on. But if we put a 12% increase in cost next year on there, let's just say it's 12% in cost. Josh is going to work some magic here. Is there a way to do that? I think you and I had set up a way to do that across all funds you were going to do. Just the water fund, but across all line items for the expenditure. To be able to do this at a policy level, at a meeting, it's unprecedented. There's very few cities have this.
Should patent this.
Okay, you see what happens there? Now we go from 96 to 35, even putting off that $100,000. So you see, we can't do this indefinitely. We can do this plan this year. We can provide some relief for the community. Next year, we might be having a discussion about a much higher increase than 3%. And it's going to be difficult for us to kick that can down the road. Now, of course, some of that will depend on the ending fund balance.
For 22, 23, does it say 2% up there?
That's just what the model incorporates as an increase overall, because there's some things like, let's say for instance, the amount of revenue that we get in falls a little shorter or something like that. That tells you exactly what ends up happening. And for example, in 21, 22, it says 7%.
Yeah.
We only raised the rates 3%, but we got new customers and we sold more water than we expected, and that gives you what it
Okay.
actually was.
I just want to make sure that wasn't our increases that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was.
We also had FEMA money came into that fund as well, which kicked up our revenue a bit higher.
Yeah, so we had
Forgot about
some
that.
dollars coming, all 3%. So this is what we would say. We're going to budget for the $100,000 transfer, and we're going to look at this again towards the end of the fiscal year. But if the trend doesn't look different, we're not going to make that transfer, which is fine. We don't have to make the transfer. We don't have to spend the money, which is what the transfer is. So if council is okay, Josh, can you take that back to our real numbers as we know them today? Just go back. So if council is okay with that, this would be the plan that we would do. It would just be, you would need to know that either we're going to have to look at putting in a second increase this year, like maybe after January, or we're going to have to look at a higher increase the next fiscal year if we kick the can down the road. I'm all for this particular case, the risk is low for us to do this action. So my recommendation, we proceed with this policy change.
I thought that we were already doing a 3%, either July 31st and then a 3% every January. Or like
No, it's just once a year.
just once.
Once a year.
What happened was traditionally the city did the increase in January. And we recommended a few years ago that we change that to June. So we actually went a year and a half without doing an increase because we held it over till June. One of the reasons is because it makes it complicated when we're trying to forecast, because we got to forecast half the year at a certain rate and then another half of the year at another rate, and then try to bring that all together in an average for the model. This way we can actually just use a rate that goes across the spectrum.
In the summertime, everybody's probably using more water anyways.
That's right, yeah. Well, and year over year, you get the same. It's just some of it comes in one year and some of it comes in another, right? So that's how it works. So I just need to hear from council that you think this is a viable option for us to move forward. We don't need like a motion or anything, but I would like to make sure that this is how you want to proceed with the budget.
Whole thing gives me heartburn.
Almost want to say go to 4%. A little bit more.
Happen at 4%.
Josh, you want to do 4% annual water?
I mean, initially, when we did these, we were going to do 6% a year, and we've been doing 3% on each one. This was before you
Yeah,
came.
yeah, yeah.
And we've kept it at that to keep the cost down because it's so much as it is already. And
We do. I think I think when we did the 3% was because the model showed us that's what we needed.
yeah,
So,
but I'm just
I-
saying, when it was originally set up, even before I came on council, it was at 6% a year per fund for the sewer and water. And we cut it back to 3 because we felt that was too much, raising it 6% every year.
So at
So-
4%, we look really good going out there. Josh, I'm trying to think, can you help me on this? The council isn't bound by any particular rate percentage. Like we wouldn't have to do a public hearing to do a 4% rate increase, right? It's just a resolution.
That's how I understand it.
Okay. In our previous ordinance, if we went above a certain percent, 6%, we had to do
Yeah,
a hearing, but in this new ordinance, we just said council sets it. So that's where that's what it would be. That would be perfectly fine if you did 4%. Honestly, if we're not going to try to keep it at the 5%, I almost feel as comfortable leaving it at 3%, but it's really up to you guys.
This does also have the deferral of the 100,000 as well. So
right.
Yeah.
So it's the
If you
deferral
put the
and-
100 back in there, what's it do for us? Well, it's going to take down 100,000. That should be an easy calculation. But again, if you're looking at like, let's say 25, 26, you're only 65 or $69,000 off your target. In 3 years, we're definitely going to return more than 65,000 back to the community. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. The other thing is perhaps what we do is leave it at 3% right now and look at it again in December. And then we could decide if we want to transfer the 100,000, if we want to raise the rate. It gives us a little flexibility. I think this one's not a problem. The sewer's going to be more difficult. But again,
Talk
it's
about-
up to you all.
When you talk about the cost of gas and everything else, that's the use across all our city vehicles.
We didn't raise our budget 100% because we actually ended up raising our line items in all of those funds about 30%. And the reason why we did that is we weren't necessarily spending everything in those line items. So we know the cost of gas went up 100%, but we we looked at what we think we'll actually spend and we'll push it, because we're trying to figure out a way to keep the rate as low as possible.
I know.
So,
Well, the reason I ask is like, so like, we're still, and it's such a sore subject. I mean, we have that safety fee attached to the water bill, and we don't have 20, like, we're not at full capacity with the police department. We're talking about possibly raising, 3 or 4%, and then again, maybe another 3% in January. And
yeah, but that has nothing to do with that fee.
no, but it's still, the way that the
The
community.
rate increase doesn't go on the public safety.
No, but it's on the water bill. So like that average citizen that is sitting looking at this water bill is that's what the community looks at.
I know, well, and just as a reminder, it's only on the bill to save money. It would have to be $1 or $2 more.
To have a
if you
different
sent out
bill.
a separate bill, and that was the way to save the money, so that's why that's on the bill. But I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is, and I hear you, is we're still in a relatively low-income community,
Mhm.
although our wealth has risen. There are people in the community that still are on low fixed incomes, and we want to think about those folks. And that's one of the reasons why we're saying, in the water fund, let's try to keep the rate this year at 3%. If you follow our standard policy that we set a few years ago, we would be looking at a 5% increase.
My concern is if we're paying an extra $15 a month on a police fee and that funds are not going to the police department, then why not remove it until we actually need it?
Well, okay, so council member, it's $12 and the funds all go to the police department.
Okay, but if it's to fund a 5th and 6th police officer and those slots are not filled, then why are we paying it?
Well, we have 6 officers in positions right now, and that we haven't had a, I don't know where this came from, but we haven't had none of the positions have been empty for a long period of time. We've had rotation where an officer has moved on to another position, and then we went out and hired another officer, but we haven't went for a long period of time down our capacity. We have 6 full-time officers on board right now. We have a 7th officer in review. So we have changeover. Basically, people leave. It takes a couple of months to fill the position. So you get these spots where there's not 7 officers, but it's not, we haven't went a year or 6 months or whatever without 7 officers. It's just, you have these incremental spots.
And a lot of that is due to the process in hiring police and the steps you have to go through and the psychological evaluations, everything. It
Yeah.
takes a long time.
Well, and there's not really a huge cost savings there. We have seen a little cost savings with that changeover in staff, but when you have somebody leave the department, you have to pay them out for their benefits. So we have to pay them for vacation, all their unused holidays and things like that. You have to pay all that. And then when you bring a new officer in, there's typically new equipment. We don't budget for all of those things typically because you plan to have full capacity. And so there's not a huge reduction in cost. You get a little bit. I think we've seen a little savings over the last couple of years with the transitions in and out, but it's, it's not something where you could plan to reduce that fee for a particular time. What it does do is when we established the fee, this was the year we were supposed to increase it. But what it did was it bought us another year or so because of a couple of things. One is some of the expenses were returned, like you said. There were a few expenses returned, and then you had changeover in that last 5 years, and you saw a little bit of savings. And so that gets you another year or so. And with the chief changeover, I mean, we may even see 2 out of it before we've got it.
Yeah.
But the public safety fee in of itself doesn't affect
The water.
water and sewer.
I-
It's on the bill, it doesn't.
I know,
affect.
I understand it. We all understand that. But that individual who has that $12 fee attached to their bill, I mean, it's just public perception. So I don't know, we're talking about, 5 to 8% increase, like eventually, or, in totality.
Yeah.
I have a hard, like, that's a hard hit to the community. And if we're feeling the cost of inflation, imagine what that single parent that's on housing assistance and SNAP benefits is feeling, or the retired individual who has a set income.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we are all like in service to them. And I worry about that. And I know that you do too. It's just, that's why I said this gives me heartburn.
I'd like to chime in if possible.
Oh, Nico's here. Hi, Nico.
Hi. Had two meetings tonight kind of collide with each other, so I apologize for being late. I really want us to be transparent with just everything that is going on, just so our citizens have a firm grasp of what the situation is. I really do not want us to go where we're, employing some scare tactics, that, our police are going to get reduced, that sort of thing, because I think that was really unhelpful the last time we had this discussion when it came to the police fee. And I think that in order for us just to be successful, we really need to be open with the public why this increase is needed, and be really clear-eyed about the increase in costs that we have. Because everybody knows that's why we had our recall and why it resulted in where we had 3 people recalled from office. And it's not so much that, I'm ever afraid of being in that position. It's just, I feel that we owe the public to be the most transparent and open and honest with them about our, circumstances all the time, no matter what, whether it's politically expedient, fun, sexy, or anything like that. We need to be open and honest with them. And I know that with the fact that we potentially have to look at raising the police fee on the water and sewer bills within the next year or two, depending on how projections shake out. To me, it really weighs on me, just this increase that we have proposed, because I think people will get to the point where they kind of figure, when is enough? When is enough that I'm gonna be paying for the services that I'm receiving? And I 100% get where we're at. It's a no-win situation, and like every city, we have to take what we can, be able to do with the resources we have. And if anything, I just really urge staff just to be super honest and open with the information that we're providing our citizens, and that we let them notice where things are at in the process. And I'm hoping this situation will elicit even greater transparency. I would love to have some videos posted on projections for where our budget is, especially in terms of the public safety fee and the need for it to potentially be raised in the next 2 years. I think that would be enormously educational to the public, and I think it would give them even more of a buy-in into our process and what's happening. And I really hope that staff takes that approach, and that we can hopefully be open and honest with, be it posting videos on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel, just anything to try to get the word out and get people in the know of what's going on. I think will be incredibly important. And that's kind of the tack that I'm hoping that staff will collaborate to take. And if need counsel to pop in and assist with that, or to help be a part of such activities, please don't hesitate to let us know, because I think whatever tools we have in our toolbox to try to be open and honest with where our money situation is at, the better. And the more informed our citizens are, the more they're going to want to get behind us when we go to them with legitimate issues and the need to increase the water and sewer bills. So I think whatever we can do to try to promote that, all the better.
Council member, were you here during the initial discussion where I was making a recommendation not to increase above our 3% in this particular fund?
I missed that part.
Okay.
Email though.
And so I just wanted to reiterate, just based on some of your comments, council member, that we actually do a public a forum, a pre-budget forum with this forecast model, and the members of the public are invited. It's prior to the budget meeting. And members of the public are invited to come and participate and ask questions. And we put the model up there. We show them all these different scenarios and our rationale. We give them an opportunity to look at our methodology and ask questions about that. We talk about where the funds are going. And then we also do take our budget presentation and we put that online. And we also take all of the budget messages that show those graphs that you were talking about of the income and expenditures in a condensed snapshot. So it's not all the fine numbers, but basically shows how much we're spending, where we're spending, where the money's going, where it's coming from across all the funds. And we put that in the newsletter, and we also put that on our website. So we have been doing a lot of those transparency programs that you were alluding to, and we'll continue to do that. Obviously, if you have other ideas, we're open to that. But what we're talking about tonight is a diversion of our policy, which is typically, if we were trying to maintain our forecast financial planning policies, we would be looking at a 5% increase this year in the water rate. But what staff is proposing is that we do not increase the water rate 5%. We leave it at the 3%, which is what we programmed in year over year. And we looked at not doing a water improvement fund transfer, or maybe doing part of a transfer, depending on how the budget works out throughout the year. The only concern with that is I wanted to deliver this message to council that if we divert from the policy and we still continue to see these high inflationary increases throughout the year, the discussion will be different next year, and we'll have to look at something larger. So your choices really are, don't do anything different this year, or do less of what we need this year. But you may have to end up doing something greater and more extreme in future years, or you do the standard increase to continue the path that we've been on for planning. And as you know, because you've been here, we can't act if we can't fund anything. We can't respond to emergencies. We can't fix broken equipment. We can't improve the infrastructure. We can't do all those things that we need to be able to do, provide the services to the community. And if we can't operate the utility properly, that ends up costing the consumers more in the long run. As an example, we do a capital project today that's $1 million, and we wait and say we're gonna, we want to defer that cost. Well, deferring cost means you're deferring a lower cost for a higher cost. And so that's inevitably what happens. That $1 million in 5 years becomes a $2 million project. Now, it helps us today, but it may impact us greater in the future. And that's really what the whole financial planning and this forecast model was all about when we organized it. So our recommendation is in the water fund itself, not to do anything. We'll monitor throughout the year. And if we see significant red flags, we'll come back to council. We just need your guidance if you support that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that deferring costs doesn't help. It's just, I think the only thing I'm trying to do is just warn staff that when the time comes again for us to discuss the public safety fee, increasing that, just that we kind of do hopefully a better job of communicating the need to the public, and just that we kind of pull all the stops, because obviously not everybody's going to be enthused about watching a budget videos. Maybe I am, being the policy nerd that I am, And I'm just hoping that before we get to the point of actually pulling the trigger on something like that, that we just take the necessary steps to try to build public support for it and just, kind of not leave any stone left unturned as far as, public awareness goes. That's kind of just my thing.
Okay.
I like the idea of reducing the rate, but I also have the concerns of if inflation keeps doing its thing and we're going to be sitting here talking about this again and trying to help out the community, but we also have utilities to pay for. And I don't want us to get into a position where we have to knee jerk the system and have an 8 or 12% increase because we had an opportunity to try to be conservative and help. And peeling back on it a little bit now, I feel like it helps us now, but does it put us in a good spot later if things continue to, these costs go way up on us? And there's all kinds of predictions of things might start coming back down to earth in October and things get a little bit easier, or it just runs rampant all the way through next year. And then everybody that's going, let's help each other out and let's try to reduce all this stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to have to demand it later. And
Let's hold that thought for a second, council member. I think the risk on water fund is really low. Just because of the utility and let's move over to the sewer fund because that may be something that might prove more true with this particular fund.
okay.
So let's move over to the sewer fund, Josh.
Sorry, did we want to keep the 4% and the 100,000 in there, or should I just reset that?
No, would you take that back down to 3%? Sorry about that, Josh. Now let's look at the bottom line. So right here, if we don't transfer that $100,000, we know that immediately our ending fund balance is $100,000 more. With just that one action, this is why I'm not concerned about the water fund.
Yeah.
Now, I would prefer to keep the financial policy in place, but it's about balance. And when I look at everything, this one doesn't bother me. I think we can weather this pretty easy. But let's look at sewer. Now, sewer's a little bit different. So you can see, oh, that's not, we're not. I was going to say,
Sorry, there is no sewer fund.
It's all free.
hey. Okay, so with sewer fund, it's a little bit more drastic because if you look at 25, 26, we're actually in the negative there. So that's not a matter of an issue of having a policy balance correlate with the ending fund balance. That's an issue of actually being in the negative. So that one's a little concerning. Now, if you look at 22, 23, which is the budget year we're talking about, we can weather that budget year fine. But if we go to the next year, which is the 23, 24, we've got a significant downward trend there, right? Now, again, the idea behind doing this budgeting and financial planning is so the impacts to the community are less over the life expectancy, not necessarily today, but over the 3 to 5 year period, it's less. So now here we can do the same thing. Let's take that $100,000 transfer out that's in capital fund. Let's just remove that just for the year. Obviously, we can't do it long term. So now you can see it pushes our negative fund balance way out, but we're drastically below the 90-day reserve. Let's take the 100,000 out for 2 years, Josh. So that doesn't really get us a whole lot. It gets us a little bit. But again, how long can you defer these capital projects? We've got a $23 million sewer treatment facility. We've got to deal with that. But what we should be doing from a financial planning standpoint is we should be taking that 100,000 and we should be putting it in for 500,000 a year. And our rate should be based off of that, knowing we've got a $23 million project that has to be completed in 6 years. Because what that does is it buys down that cost of that increase in the 6th year. Now we're talking about getting rid of everything that we're trying to put into that projected thing just to keep the fund above water.
Yeah.
And the sewer, uses a lot more energy. Those costs have gone up. There's just a number of things. But also, in past years, when we looked at this model, we really needed a little bit higher increase, but we didn't do that. We kept it at 3%. So here's some other decision points. Now, if you're asking Josh and I from a financial analysis standpoint and planning standpoint from the city, can we defer this a year? We're not concerned about that. But it's back to the same thing. Now, the water fund, maybe we end up to right that ship next year with other increases of a 5 or 6% increase. That's not that much of an increase when you're talking about a $45 bill. You might be talking about $2 or $3 on there. But the sewer fund's a little different animal. And if we get into an 11 or 12% inflation next year, this one's harder to write. And I'm happy if council wants to maintain this at a 3%. I think we could defer the 1 year transfer into the capital fund. But if you go through this fund, there's not a lot of expenditures that can be deferred. If you look at, like, in this particular fund, we still have about $1.5 million worth of debt. Now, council remembers we refinanced that debt last year.
Yeah.
That saved the city $400,000. It's about $20,000 or $30,000 a year. So you can see those debt payments and how they're going down. But we still have $1.5 million in debt. That's that's 15% of the rates right there. It's just in that old debt. And remember, that's throwaway debt because all of that basically goes away when we build a new system. None of that can be used for the new system, but we're still paying on it. So that's kind of those compounding things that you have when you don't really have that long-term financial planning. So we can defer this. What I would suggest, if council wants to keep the rates at 3%, we don't do the $100,000 transfer. And then I say we look at this again in December and perhaps try to do a mid-year adjustment. Just if the inflation keeps going in the direction it's going, that would be the wise thing to do. Now, none of this is going to hit us next year or the year after, but in that 3rd and 4th year, it's going to hit us hard. We will still have people that will struggle to pay their bills in that 3rd and 4th year. We will still have folks that are on fixed incomes. We will still have low-income families. And so I'm not necessarily worried about the average person that can weather the storm, but when we get into that 4th and 5th year, those are the people that I feel like we're going to get the hardest. And again, this is financial planning, so it's a policy statement from council. We don't want to make these choices in a vacuum, but you just need to know what's ahead of us if we take this action. So again, Josh and I say we're good with this fund budgeting at the 3%, and then let's look at it in December. That's our recommendation. But if you're not comfortable with that, if you don't want to take the risk next year of a higher inflation and then having to do something deeper, we need to do a different action.
I'm okay with this. But to piggyback on what Nico says, this is the type, if we're gonna be having like another, let's say 1 or 2% increase, that we need to prepare the community for that. And we need to be a little more proactive about the steps we take in our transparency.
And my recommendation, if we take this action, is we've got an issue of the newsletter coming out.
Mhm.
I can write an article in the newsletter. I can explain to people that we're really sensitive to the community and all of the additional costs that the current economy and inflation is causing. And we're trying to hold this down, this rate increase to the standard increase and not raise it according to the inflation rate. However, the community needs to understand if we take this step, the council may be forced to do additional increases in the future, depending on where the economy goes. I mean, people may forget that in a year when we relook at it,
It's true.
but at least we can look back at that article or that publication or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we can say, we communicated this to the community. You may have forgotten, but we're very transparent. The other thing is when we have our budget committee meetings, this will be a topic that we'll have to broach in this forum. So we'll have to say, this is the policy council wanted us to follow. Here's the benefits.
Yeah.
Here's the risk.
Yeah.
And this is our recommendation. The budget committee could say, no, we don't like that. We want to do something different. We don't feel like that is, worth the risk. However, this is what our position is. Now, in a perfect world, I would just say to you, let's just raise with the inflationary rate and go with it. This isn't perfect. So we'll have to have those discussions, but obviously if there's a majority of the budget committee that wants to do something different, then we'll have to reconcile that. So.
And I assume that we're gonna be actively looking ways to reduce our costs. Like, we're pretty good about thinking outside of the box and
When I came to the city, all of these funds were either in the negative or they would have been in the negative within 12 months. We have done those deep cuts. And what we do every year since that year is we do what's a beginning fund balance budget. What that means is you go through the individual cost line items. And our budget is not overly complex. O&M, so you have salaries and benefits.
Mhm.
We can't change those.
No.
The insurance companies don't negotiate premiums with us. We get a group discounted rate and we either buy the insurance or we don't.
Yeah.
It's that simple. So you take salaries and benefits out of the picture, and then what you're left with O&M, it's very stripped down and very basic. But if, let's say, for instance, office supplies were $1,000, it doesn't matter if they spent, $200 or $800. We start with $1,000. Now, why do we do that? Well, because if you reduce those budget line items, your budget does this each year. And let's say, for instance, we reduce that down to $300. And we say what we're communicating to that department is, if you don't spend your budget, we're taking it away from you. And what you have in government with those types of policies is you have people going out spending on things that may or may not be necessary. So I go into the office, I'm not saying I've done this, but it's a scenario. I go into the office and there's $800 worth of copy paper because they didn't want to have their supplies budget taken away. Now, we didn't do that. When we came in and reorganized the budget, what we said is, we're going to start you at $1,000, and every year we're going to give you $1,000 in the budget. You return what you absolutely do not need. And if you look at our budgets, we're returning 20, 30, sometimes 40% of these budgets back into the beginning fund balance. Because in our city, unlike maybe it might be structured in others, there's not an incentive to spend money unnecessarily. So, and then our department heads are very mindful of that. We've got very frugal department heads. I guarantee you, Steve will make something before he'll buy something. That's just the way our folks, that's just the way they're wired. So when we have money in these funds, it's really for worst case scenario. There might be a $50,000 repair line item. That's probably the most expensive repair, non-equipment type repair that we would see in a given year. Hopefully, I don't want to jinx myself, but that would be very untypical. So typically you're returning that money spending. And that's one of the reasons why I'm concerned, but I'm not concerned to the point to where I want to harm anybody. I don't want to be detrimental to our community to make this adjustment, because we will see a return this year. We factored that into these projections because we've got a good handle of what they'll be. But we'll get a return next year on some of these line items. And that will help offset that cost. And that's one of the reasons why we're able to stay so solvent, for better word, financially, is because we do those returns and get that back. So I think I feel like we're okay. If we follow our typical process, we would be looking at an increase, but I think we can do that.
Okay.
Next year, we may not have that option, but we do have that option.
Well, I feel it's fair to go with the 3% and then revisit in December. So then if things really are taken off, we can try to stay ahead of it.
That would be our.
And then hopefully that gives people a little bit of relief and
Actual amount. Josh, do you know
I
what?
think if you do 3% across the board, you're looking at about $2.70. Does that sound right, Josh?
Yeah, it's about a $3, I think, rate increase on the sewer. No. Yeah, if you do water and sewer together, it's about $3.
So what would that be if we did the 5 to 7%?
It would be $5.
Five
Yeah,
to
that's true.
seven.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, guys, my brain's not working.
So our water sewer bill combined is roughly unless you're a high user, it's roughly $100 for the water and sewer portion. So if you just said 5% across
Yeah,
the board, it'd be
$5.
$5. We were looking, if we follow the law, we really need 10 in the sewer, 5 in the water, so you're looking at like 7.5 across the board. But Josh and I feel comfortable not going to that full price. So 3%, so let's say we just did 5, and we kind of split everything across the board. They're saving $2. Now, I don't know if $2 is a big enough impact or not, but that's what we say.
Anybody else?
So is that what the council would like to follow our recommendation, or would you like us to look at the policy?
I'm okay with following the recommendation with the 3% and the moving the $100,000 line item. And then we review again. Like I said, yeah.
December. Yeah.
And then,
Have to do something in January to start in February.
Yeah.
Assuming you don't want to do it in January after Christmas.
with the recommendation of being a little more proactive and getting the community ready for that possibility of a second increase.
And part of that is your discussion with the
Yes.
community too, about the fact that we have to decide what are some of the things that we want to do. And I know that especially the public safety is coming up, but I really feel like we can use some of that message with public safety. I know that's a dollar savings, but that's a policy discussion, not a financial discussion. This is a financial discussion. With that particular discussion, the policy is, do you want a level of service? And if so, are you willing to pay this fee for it? Because you can't have the level of service without the fee. And so you could set a policy that says, you know, we're gonna staff within whatever the city can afford without this fee, and it would be for officers. That's what it would be.
I think, and like I said, the biggest concern is that it's attached to the water bill. I understand, and the council understands that this is not part of the water bill, and we're saving money every month by attaching that service bill into one big water bill. Like, and it's listed differently, and it's a different line item completely. But there are those in the community that look at that and say, this is part of my water bill. And I think we're gonna have that no matter what.
Just like they call a water bill, in the reality, it's a water.
It's a water and sewer bill, yes.
It'd be like getting your phone and internet and, you know.
Like for
electricity on one
Comcast to
bill.
bill you separately for internet, phone
Yeah.
and cable. You
Yeah.
get 3 bills instead of just a combined statement.
Soon enough.
So yeah, and that is part of our job. We do a lot of that proactive outreach, but remember, it's difficult. Not everybody's busy. And you gotta have a sender and you gotta have a receiver, right, in order to have communication. And you oftentimes have this information sent out. But people are just busy, and so you gotta be real proactive and go out and, you're right, knock on their door and talk to them about it, basically. Yeah, all right.
Okay.
So it sounds like we've kind of beat this up a little bit, and I think we'll have more discussions, obviously, as time goes on. But this is how we'll approach the budget, and then at the budget committee level, we'll make changes as needed.
Before we moving on to the next item, we had somebody come in for public comment that came in late. Do you want to let them speak now, or do you want to wait till the end? No, go, Patrick, right? If you
I just wanted
could,
to let you guys know, yesterday I went to the post office.
if this is recorded, if you can come and speak at the dais, and then just state your first and last name and address.
I'm Patrick Farrell, and I live on 135 Cleveland Street here in Aumsville, and I thank you for letting me talk. I just want to let you guys know, I don't know what the rules or the laws are around here, but I went to the post office yesterday morning about 9, and there was some guy sacked out in the post office, like kind of resting his head on a backpack. So I don't know how long he'd been there. Don't know if he was a homeless person or not, but he was just kind of taking a nap. So it is open.
It is
on
open
Sunday.
24
So,
hours.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a loitering law or some kind of, if the police can kind of check in on that because I wasn't sure how long it was there either, but
Okay,
I just,
I appreciate that. I think we do have some changes coming in legislatively about like homeless and.
and I wasn't sure. It didn't really hurt me, but I thought, I kind of thought when I went home, it's like, I probably should have checked on him. He might have been, in pain or in suffering, but he didn't bother me when I was there. He was just minded his own business, but he may be the exception, not the rule, or vice versa. So I just wanted to let you guys know, and I wasn't sure if the post office is something the Aumsville police can check in on or not.
It's open. They can check, they can go in there and check in and.
And it was a federal property, so I wasn't sure about that, but, well, thank you for letting me talk.
Thank
I
you
just
for
thought-
letting us know.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank you for your.
Thank you,
patience.
sir. Appreciate it.
Patrick, before you leave, let me just, so if you encounter that again, we have a non-emergency dispatch, and there's also a green or a gray phone right outside the building here, that's 24/7. You can just pick that line up, and we'll go do a welfare check to make sure that that individual is medically doing well.
So they want to get him in trouble, but
Yeah.
I want to make sure he's okay, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the direction that I heard was keep the 3% and defer the 100,000 then on those funds. I just wanted to clarify when I plug it in.
Yes.
That's the direction.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we ready to move on? Where do we leave off at?
I think that's what, you've got
Oh.
the agenda. I don't have it.
City Administrator report.
Yeah, I don't have a lot for this report. As a matter of fact, I could have rolled this discussion into the last discussion. And this discussion is really related to our employee COLA increases. We have to factor a number into the budget. And our employees have gotten together and discussed this. If we followed the CPI, we would be close to 8%. Or right around 8%. Our employees have gotten together and they would be happy taking a 6% COLA increase. They want to kind of help out as much as they can. They understand that we're trying to do a balance here. And that is a lot. It does have an impact to the budget, but it's not the greatest impact to the budget. Really, the energy costs and service costs are the biggest impact to the budget. So I support that. I think it's good middle of the road approach. And again, with our employees, they do their own, for lack of a better word, bargaining group. And so in our last agreement, and I hate to use the word agreement because it's not a contract, but when we did the salary studies and the COLA analysis a year ago, or I think it was a year ago now, maybe it might have been 2, but a year or 2 ago, what we said is we would accept this, the staff said they would accept a lower COLA, and they did. I think at the time it might have been, our COLA was at 2%. I can't remember if it was just above or just below. But we'd accept that for the duration of the verbal agreement, except if COLAs changed more than 1%, then we'd come back and relook at those COLAs. And obviously the CPI went from, whatever it was, 1.5% to 8%. And so they've asked to revisit that. And I think it's a good medium approach, and I appreciate all that our staff does to help us try to meet that. And we had discussions between 5 and 6%, and everybody kind of settled on 5.5. Some people really wanted 6. I just feel like the difference is negligible. It wouldn't even show up in a rate increase, the difference between 5.5 and 6. Now, the difference between 2 and 6 obviously has a little bit higher impact, but my concern is about, again, it's about when we go out and we do salary surveys again in our industry, and we use 10 to 15 cities that are comparable to our city. And what does that mean when we look at that? One, we use the same cities each time we do this study. So we're not trying to pick cities that are, better or worse in that particular cycle. We use the same cities in our list, and we look for cities that are similar in our population, and we'll go below 1,000 and above 1,000, 1,500, because you can't really find cities that are right in that same population. And we look at cities with like a similar economic status. So, a police department, non-tourism type city, and that's what we try to roll into our comparables. And my concern is if we keep the COLA too low, what's going to happen is when we go to do that comparison again, we're going to be looking at a much bigger increase. It's kind of the same policy discussion here. So my recommendation is to provide the staff with a 6% COLA. And it's factored into these budget numbers already.
I think
I think it's
6%.
fair because they did stay below last year. And they agreed to stick to the agreement.
Are you guys good with that?
Yeah, I'm
Great.
good with it.
All right. I don't want to end this meeting talking about this negative budget. So let's talk about some positive stuff here. And the positive stuff here is all of our other funds look really good. Our street fund is looking good, and we should be able to do a street project. We've got numerous park projects that are out in grant applications, and we've accounted for those in our match, in our budget. We've got a whole number of projects that are underway right now, including the electronic reader board sign, which will help us talk to our community. And again, remember, this is that communication where they're driving by, it's going to be right there for them to see and notice versus having to actually open a newsletter or get online or something like that. So we've got that. We've got the Veterans Memorial Project out front that we'll be doing. We're going to try to coordinate that grand opening with Veterans Day. We've just got a lot of great positive stuff. We're bringing back our community events. Superhero Carnival, we're planning for that and getting people on board, and the Corn Festival. So we just got a lot of positive stuff. And remember, a lot of those events are free to the community because, again, we want to try to provide that experience at a low cost. So Superhero's free. You know, kids can come and play games and it doesn't cost them anything. So we do have a lot of positive things going. And honestly, outside of water and sewer and my concern a few years out the road, we've got a great budget and we're still very, very sound.
Mayor and councilor reports. Anything for good of the order?
Just want to say I got lots of positive comments about the Easter event. Community really seemed to like it.
This is the first time I was able to attend the Easter event, and it was so much fun. You guys do a really good job.
The Easter Bunny was especially animated this year. Not that our previous Easter Bunny wasn't animated, but the Easter Bunny just really enjoyed it.
Might have a competition next year, huh?
Any correspondence? Says none. And if that's everything, we can move to adjourn at 8:12 p.m.